Hi and happy Monday. Today we decided that we were going to spend some time with a topic called Food Preservation 101. And so, by definition, food preservation is a technique to prevent food spoilage, food poisoning, food infection, or to prevent microbial contamination of food. We also might think of it as just a way to extend the shelf life of a food product. As you know, pretty much every agricultural food product is relatively perishable, and so as consumers, one of our goals should be to allow those products to last for as long as possible. So first of all, now that we know what food preservation is, what are some examples? What does food preservation look like? The first one would be, or one of some of the most common, one would be pickling. Pickling would be done to preserve meat or vegetables using an acid to help eliminate microbial bacteria contamination. Salting is one that's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, where you would basically put fish or meat in salt. That would basically sap the moisture away, but also at the same time destroy the opportunity for any bacteria to get a foothold. Dehydration, which is basically the removal of water from a food product. And so we could do that by, like for example, making beef jerky, making dried apples or bananas or any kind of fruit. That would be some common examples around home of dehydration. Smoking. A lot of you maybe smoke meats on a Traeger or something like that, but the process has been around for a long, long time. Similar process to dehydration, except now we're removing the moisture slowly, but we're also adding the compounds from the smoke, which are going to be antimicrobial in nature as they cover the food and embed themselves in the food. The next one is probably the absolute most common, and actually is the most common method of food preservation in the U.S. today, in the world today really, refrigeration or freezing. Both are designed to extend the shelf life significantly of foods. The thing to remember is that refrigeration and freezing do not destroy microbes, do not destroy bacteria. They simply slow the growth and allow that food to last longer before it spoils. So if you take it out of the refrigerator or take it out of the freezer and get it to a temperature back where those microbes can take hold again, they're once again going to grow. So we have to work on maintaining keeping the food outside of what we call the danger zone in terms of temperature. And so anything between the ranges of 40 to 140 is where bacteria would grow the best. So refrigeration obviously gets it below 40, freezing way below 40, and then above 140 would be cooking, would destroy any microbial activity. The final one, and the one that we're going to talk to you about today specifically, is canning. And that is a process of processing and sealing a food product within a container at a high temperature, which then will create a vacuum to first of all, the items that will go in it will be sterile because of heat, and then it will create a vacuum which then does not allow anything else to get in. So that's canning basically in a nutshell. Some of the items that we have canned most recently from, and a lot of these from our farm, we have applesauce. Here's an example of pickling. We made dill pickles. We made pickled jalapenos. And we also have made lots of jams and jellies, and this one happens to be peach. So what we're going to focus on today is actually how to make jelly, how to take the product that we have and maybe turn it into something a little more value added, and extend the shelf life and allow it to last a little bit longer. Okay, to make jelly, some of the items that we need, or all the items that we need, materials needed are going to be a stove top, a range top to cook with a pot or pan on. We need a large pot to cook in, and another one that maybe even a little bit larger than this works really well to fill with water in order to sanitize our jars and our lids, but also then finally to use a hot water bath, get the water boiling at the end to allow the jars to heat the jars to seal. We'll also need canning jars, just like these or this size. I've got a few right here that we're going to use. Typically, we would like to have them uniform in size, if at all possible. Normally, we make jelly in an 8-ounce jar, just like this, or a 4-ounce jar, which is obviously then just half that size. That way, we have 2 different sizes to sell. My wife and I have done quite a bit of that and had some success. So either a 4 or 8-ounce jar works really well for jelly. After the jars, we need a typical canning funnel. You can pick this up at Walmart or even Dollar General for just a couple dollars. We need a pair of canning tongs to help pick up our hot jars. Obviously, the water is going to be boiling, both when we're sanitizing the jars and when we're hot sealing them. So it's important to have something to allow us to not get burned. But also, if you have a pair of just regular tongs, that will work. But these are rubberized, so they're intended to grip and squeeze the jar so that you don't drop them and do any damage. And finally, we've got a kind of a drain mat laying here on our table. We also have a metal table, so none of our hot jars are going to damage our surface, but a lot of people maybe don't have a metal table. So if you're laying it on your kitchen table, you don't want to lay something very hot on it. So I would recommend a clean towel or a bunch of pot holders laid out. But either way, you want to make sure your surface is clean, and then the towel or the pot holders are also clean. And that should do it for the equipment that we need. All right, the next thing that we want to take a look at to make jelly is what ingredients are we going to need. And so first, for today's batch, we want to make this as easy as possible. So we just picked up some mixed berries from Walmart. You could get those at Food Mart. You could get really any frozen fruit or fresh fruit for that matter at the local grocery store as well. We have used all kinds of fruit with the recipe that we're going to share with you. So mixed berries, we've done peaches off our peach tree right here off our farm, apricots off our trees. We've made jam with fresh pineapple, sliced and processed up. We've done even canned pineapple. We've used blackberries that we've gone over and done the pick your own bucket of berries at the Depot Market at Cortland. We've also purchased locally some strawberries and also some cherries from Sweet Cherry Village in Belleville. So we try to also use as much stuff either from our farm or that we purchase locally as possible. So and the recipe has been pretty versatile and it allowed us to make just about any kind of jelly. So we've been pretty happy with it. So what do we need as far as ingredients? Any kind of fruit again, but 6 cups of fruit is what the recipe calls for. 1/4 cup of lemon juice. It's not exactly a health food, so each batch calls for 5.5 cups of sugar. And finally, 1 package, so this is 2 packages, but 1 package of pectin, and that will be the ingredient that allows it to or causes it to gel and set up so it gives the consistency of jelly. And that's really all you need. Okay, the first thing that we're going to need to do is wash all of our jars, rings, and the lids that we're going to, the sealable part that we're going to use. And so we'll wash those and just kind of let them drip dry, making sure that we don't touch anything that might be dirty. I also am using a new clean scratch pad. If you use the one that may have been sitting, at the edge of your sink or in the sink, it might be a little musty or smelly. So we try to, if we're washing a batch of jars, try and use a clean pad. Okay, we have every jar that we're going to use today washed. We've got most of them that are either two different sizes, either this 4 ounce or this 8 ounce. We've got one oddball here that we're going to go ahead and use, maybe to catch some that we're going to save for ourselves. But so we'll use our canning tongs. We'll put it down in this jar or this pot of water, one at a time, carefully. One thing to be really careful with is if the water is already boiling, you got to be careful that it doesn't splash up on you. My water is heating as we're talking here, so we're okay. So now we'll bring that to a boil to go ahead and make sure that our jars are sanitized. We probably wouldn't have had to wash them ahead of time, but we just want to make sure that anything that was in them was out. This would probably be enough to kill or sanitize or clean anything that was in there. One more thing that we want to do prior to starting is just add a little bit of vinegar to our water, and that will keep the jars from being cloudy when we pull them off out of the water. Keep them nice and shiny and clean. Okay, while the jars are warming, to sanitize the jars, we're going to go ahead and get started making our jelly. So the first thing we're going to add is our 6 cups of fruit. We could measure it out, but this is what we usually use, is these 2 packages. That's pretty close. So we're just going to go ahead, drop in our mixed fruit. Okay, so we have our fruit in. Our next ingredient is a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Before we add any heat, we're going to stir those 2 together to combine them. We've got just a little bit of it that's still frozen, but as soon as we add heat, it will thaw out. Making jelly for us, my wife and I, has become kind of a wintertime activity. So normally in the spring and summer, as the fruit ripens, we'll pick it. We'll eat a lot of it fresh, of course, or make apple pies, or have fresh apricots, or peach pie, peach cobbler. But then it's kind of too hot in the summertime to do a lot of canning. So we'll typically then would be when if we have to, we'll can tomatoes or make salsa. We'll make pickles then. But a lot of our jelly making gets done in the fall and winter. And it happens to be when a lot of people tend to want that kind of a product. They're getting ready to go to Thanksgiving dinner or have a Christmas with their family. They'll use them for toppings, for spreads, or just to have snacky type foods, bread and jelly, etc. So that's when we've had a lot of success selling it, and so that's really when we make it. And so the advantage of doing that in the fall is that we can use, there's obviously a lot of heat being generated, and so we can use that to help heat our house essentially, and not have to have our air conditioner working overtime to cool it back down. So that's one advantage to what we're doing. Okay, we have our sugar and our lemon juice combined, our fruit and our lemon juice combined. Now we're going to add our pectin. Again, we said this is what is going to allow it to gel to create that jam or jelly-like consistency. So we're just going to use 1 package. Pour that in. And stir. Get it all the way mixed in. And then we're going to turn our heat on. Okay, as we dumped our pectin in and have it stirred, now we've got it on kind of a medium heat, somewhere in the middle of the road, and we're just going to continue and stir continuously to prevent anything on the bottom from burning. We could use a double boiling pan, but we've had a lot of good luck just with a regular pot, so as long as we keep stirring, everything's just fine. Alright, we're ready it's to a boil. We're going to add our sugar, 5½ cups, so I'm using a ½ cup. So I need 11 of these. One. Okay, we have our sugar successfully added after a little spill. Now we've stirred it and incorporated it all in. Now we want to, it was boiling, we're going to bring it back to a rolling boil for 1 minute. So we'll just continue stirring until it starts to boil, and then we'll kind of look at our clock and let it boil, continue to boil for 1 minute, and then we'll just shut the heat off. Okay, one of the common questions and terms that's used kind of interchangeably, I sometimes do it on accident, but there is a difference between jam and jelly. Jelly is pretty much made with fruit juice, and it's generally kind of clear in terms of when you look at it, you can almost see through it. Jam, on the other hand, is made with either whole fruit or chunks of fruit or fruit pulp. And it's going to be much thicker in consistency, and you're probably going to get some of that actual fruit feel as you're eating it. And then preserves is actually, it has larger chunks of fruit in it. So jelly made with juice, jam made with the actual fruit itself, going to have a little bit of pulpiness to it probably, and then preserves is going to actually have chunks of fruit in it. So probably, if we were being technical, even when we're all said and done, there's going to be a few whole berries in this, so this would probably technically be a berry preserves. So this is still in the process of coming back to a boil. Over here, our jars look like the water's starting to roll, so they're sanitized. We'll be ready to take those out in just a minute. Okay, it came to a boil, so now we start our timer for a minute. So we'll just continue to stir as it boils, and then we'll move it off the heat after a minute is up. Okay, we just took our jam off the stove, and what we're doing right now is just it kind of foams up right at the end, and so we're trying to remove as much of that foam as possible, trying not to get any of the fruit. Because as it sits in the jar, it will separate out, and you'll be left with a kind of a foam layer and the darker jam. And so you want to try and remove as much of that foam as possible. That way it doesn't go in the jar. Ready to start loading our jars. So we've got a sanitized jar that we're not going to touch the inside of. We've got our funnel that's clean. One piece of equipment that was necessary that I forgot to mention earlier was a dipper. Move this over close, so hopefully And they'll probably get a few drips here and there. Okay, as I'm filling the jars, this one got just a little bit too full. But what I'm looking for is I need to have what's called head space at the top of the jar. And for these is about 1/4 of an inch between the product and the top of the jar. And what that does is enables enough air to be in there to create a proper vacuum so that the jar will seal and stay sealed for the long term. Okay, after we've got the jars loaded, we're going to wipe down both the threaded part on the jar as well as just the very top, the rim, still not getting anything in the jar. That way we keep anything from being between the seal and the top of the jar, as well as then hopefully keep the ring lid from getting anything sticky on it. Okay, what I'm doing next is I've got the lids face to face. I'm going to dip them down in the boiling water. This is going to, one, sanitize the sealed part of the lid, as well as just soften the rubber or the wax seal that's on the lid. That way it seats down correctly to the glass jar. Now we're just going to center the lid right onto the jar. Okay, once we've got the lids on and kind of a seal sort of made, as we push them down, we're going to add the ring to it. And it's important probably to have something to protect your hands, as that, there we go, jar is extremely hot. And I'm trying to match the colors of bronze colored lids and silver, so I'm trying to match the colors correctly. We've got all the lids on. Now we're ready to heat process the jars, and that will create the vacuum within the jar, cause it to seal, preserving it hopefully to last a year or more. So here we go. Okay, I've got all my jars back in the boiling water, and it's up to boil. So now we're ready to go ahead and start the timer on the heat. We want to set that to 10 minutes, and they're going to boil for 10 minutes, and just hit start. Can you hear it? Okay, we've hit our 10-minute mark. They should be able to seal. So what's going to happen now is we're going to take them out, set them here to kind of drip off and slowly start to cool down. They'll need to sit there for probably 2 or 3 hours and we'll hear the center of the jar suck in as they begin to cool. When we're all finished, we should be able to go by and push the top of each one, and it would not make a popping sound. It would mean that it was sucked in, and that would tell us that they were sealed. Okay, we're going to allow these to sit there. You heard one pop, so it's sealing down already. But we're going to allow these to sit for the next 8 hours and just cool and make sure they're sealed. When they're finished sealing, you're supposed to store a jar then with the top off, with the ring off. That way it's really easy to tell then if it's sealed or not. Because if this were on, we might not notice if it was popped loose. We wouldn't want somebody to get sick, so we're going to store them with the lids off. The other thing that storing it with the ring off will do is prevent, if there's any moisture in there, prevent the lid or the ring from rusting to the seal and also to the jar. So with that, the last thing that we would do with these jars would be to either label them with a paper label, sticker label, with maybe the kind of jelly they were. For us, since we're doing it as a business, it's going to include our business name, our address, and also the contents of the jar, fulfilling the labeling requirements for a home business. But other than that, you could also just do it with a Sharpie, making sure that you mark what it is, when it was made, so that you can refer back to it later. With that, thanks for watching, and hope you can enjoy some jelly or jam of your own.